Building on the legacy, the KLE Group makes plans for the post-Bolt era. Weekend Business Report starts right now. Good evening and welcome to the show. I'm Kenil Gale. The KLE Group has been able to build a restaurant chain with the help of a track and field legend. But now that that legend is retiring, what does it mean for the Tracks and Records brand? We're taking a closer look in a few minutes, but before that, here are some of the top business news stories BATV brought you this week. Government ministers' phone bills are to be capped at $40,000. Cabinet approved an interim policy this week for all mobile communications directly related to government ministers and ministers of state. Here's more.
Senator Ruel Reid says Cabinet has approved an interim policy to cap the phone bills of all government ministers. The amount has been set at $40,000 and follows the recent uproar about an $8 million phone bill racked up by Finance Minister Audley Shaw.
A proposal for the interim policy for the use of government mobile telephones and closed user group, which includes a cap of $40,000 per month on all mobile telephone communications expenses directly related to each minister of government, both ministers and ministers of state. That figure should be for direct expenses of the ministry to which the minister is so assigned.
Senator Reid says the capped figure was deemed to be reasonable after Cabinet analyzed the survey.
Based on our survey of rates, the usage, what we consider reasonable, to the extent that you have voice charges, you have data charges, opportunities to use Wi-Fi, roaming charges, etc. We came down, having done the survey, that certainly $40,000 was a reasonable amount. And by consensus, the Cabinet reviewed the proposal and we agreed.
He adds that the government is also looking to make the policy retroactive.
Capping ministers' phone bills is not enough. That's the word from PSOJ's CEO Dennis Chung. He's raising concerns about how the cap will be monitored. Mr. Chung says if the government isn't careful, it could fall into the trap of implementing new strategies which result in old problems. More in this report.
Information Minister Ruel Reid announced yesterday that ministers and state ministers' phone bills are to be capped at $40,000 a month. The new policy follows the uproar over the $8 million phone bill racked up by Finance Minister Audley Shaw last financial year. But according to PSOJ CEO Dennis Chung, capping ministers' phone bills may not be enough to ensure something similar doesn't happen again.
It's going to be important, though, is not just that you have the cap, but that there's some control mechanism in place to monitor the cap, because I think that is what the real issue was before. Because when the bill that was talked about, the $8.3 million, got to $8.3 million over 12 months, it means that for at least 11 months before that, nothing was being done, or so it would appear. So, we need to understand not just what the cap is, but we need to understand what is the control mechanisms and what is going to be our accountability within the organization for ensuring that the cap is maintained.
But Mr. Chung adds that he wholeheartedly endorses the policy to cap the phone bill.
Yeah, I think that the cap on the phone bill of $40,000 is reasonable, and there's a further explanation that the permanent secretary in each ministry would have the authority to approve any amounts over that. I think it's reasonable to approach it in that way.
The United States Embassy in Jamaica says increasing trade and boosting economic ties with Jamaica are among its reshaped priorities under the new Trump administration. Here's more.
In terms of objectives, the embassy says it will be facilitating legitimate Jamaican travel to the U.S. and will support macroeconomic stability and economic reform in Jamaica. The embassy is also making a commitment to support more U.S.-Jamaica business relations and the transformation of Jamaica's energy sector. They are also pledging to increase enforcement against violators of intellectual property rights. When it comes to safeguarding the United States and its citizens, the embassy says it will be working to protect American residents and tourists in Jamaica. It's also focusing on facilitating extraditions of transnational criminals to the U.S. and improving Jamaican port and shipping container security programs. Jamaica will also receive support from the embassy on global issues such as fostering human rights and rights of LGBTI individuals, combating gender-based violence, and trafficking in persons, among other issues.
We'll have more news later, but changing gears now, Usain Bolt brings the curtain down on his career in a few days when he hopes to anchor Jamaica's 4x100 meter relay team at the World Championships now happening in London to another gold medal. That will be his final race on the global stage, and his Tracks and Records partners are hoping that his final race will usher in a new era of opportunities for the man and his brand. The Tracks and Records brand is synonymous with Usain Bolt. The brand has recently increased its presence locally. The first Usain Bolt's Tracks and Records franchise was opened less than a year ago, and the KLE Group is already pleased with the location.
We've sold our first franchise last year, beginning of last year, and we opened in September last year in Ocho Rios, Jamaica. That has been a tremendous success. We know the tourist destination of Ocho Rios was a target location from day one. What we didn't anticipate was that we'd get as much local support as we are getting in that town. And you know, because of that, we end up with a much more consistent, steady flow of traffic than we may have originally projected.
With Ocho Rios already doing well, the group is opening up another franchise in Montego Bay.
That location is currently under construction, and we're targeting a Q4 opening, fourth quarter 2017 opening for that location. So franchising in Jamaica has been moving ahead solid. We also have interest in Negril, which is another area that we would love to move into, and we're looking at Trelawney as well.
So, what about taking the brand overseas?
The thing about those markets is that they're super competitive, and what we're in the process of doing is, you know, between the due diligence process that the franchisee takes on and the due diligence process that we need to take on regarding the franchisee, it's a bit of a timely exercise. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. The Ocho Rios franchisee we were in discussions with for over a year and a half before we eventually got that sorted out. The Montego Bay franchisee was over 6 months we were discussing it with. I have potential franchisees in London that I've been working with for in excess of a year. Likewise in Florida, Orlando, Florida, South Florida, down in the Pembroke Pines area. These areas are targets for us, and we have identified very viable partners for those markets, and it's really just a matter of going through the process and pulling it all together.
There's no doubt the Tracks and Records brand has benefited from brand Bolt, especially during Olympics and World Championship seasons.
The partnership with Bolt from day one has just been the most dynamic thing for us, because we've obviously been able to leverage a lot in his career, and so far since we've been in partnership with him, we've had the opportunity to leverage a lot of things. Olympics, a few Olympics that have gone by, the other World Championships as well. So what we have done is we continue to learn from each of those exercises, and this year we're pulling together some crazy celebrations. I mean, the lead up and the anticipation, the whole campaign is called Forever Bolt. So the whole lead up on the campaign will be surrounding Forever Bolt and really just celebrating just the most incredible career. and really just anticipating and looking forward to all of what's to come after track and field.
With Bolt hanging up his spikes, what does this mean for the Tracks and Records brand?
Tracks and Records as a concept and as a brand is built around Brand Jamaica. And the main pillar behind Tracks and Records is Jamaica. Usain Bolt, we signed a partnership with Usain Bolt it was 2010. At that point in time, Usain Bolt had a triple single under his belt, not even a triple double or a triple triple. So, the arrangement with the Usain partnership was really more built on the person and that he is. He's larger than life, and Usain as a person is not defined by any race or races. It's about him as a person and what he represents with regards to Jamaica.
The KLE boss says he's actually excited about Bolt's post-track and field plans.
I'm looking for as much dynamics and as much excitement as you would have had in the track and field era. And why is that? That's because Bolt is Bolt, and that won't ever change. So you can look for all kinds of. I don't want to disclose any of his excitement that he has coming, but it's certainly something that we are anticipating.
He says there are also plans to produce more specific merchandise to help cash in on the Bolt legacy.
Right now, we're actually doing quite well with merchandise. As it stands right now, definitely would like to leverage that in other ways. We will have a whole new line of merchandise that actually will be stocked on the shelves as of today that we're very excited about. That was designed by a Jamaican, and it will have a Usain Bolt Tracks and Records tag. So it's our line that we're introducing with a lot of really cool designs and stuff like that. Merchandise is definitely one of the focuses. We do exceptionally well with our own branded coffee and hot sauces, and but the best sellers are usually the garments or the shirts, hats, those kinds of things. 2 to 1 over everything else.
Company news is after the break, then later, women being used as bargaining chips in South Sudan. More WBR after this break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. Mela FM buys Hot 102 FM. NCB records super net profit, and the VMBS looks to defer the share offer to finance mortgage loans. Here's Jason Muyang with the details in this week's company news.
Melo FM's parent company is taking over the owners of Hot 102 FM. The Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica has given approval for the Cornwall Broadcasting Company, the owner of Melo, to take over management and control of Western Broadcasting Services, which operates Hot 102. The Broadcasting Commission says with the new acquisition, Cornwall Broadcasting must provide coverage to 90% of the island within 6 months. National Commercial Bank NCB Financial Group is reporting over $14 billion in net profit for the 9 months ended June. The group says the 9-month result is its highest net profit performance. The figure exceeded the full-year results for the 2016 financial year and is a 48% increase over the corresponding period last year. Meanwhile, NCB Financial Group President and CEO Patrick Hilton says the bank is about to open its first Agile Lab, which will result in faster and better service. Agile Lab is a rapid application development platform for developing business application software. The Victoria Mutual Building Society VMBS says it will use the proceeds of a deferred share offer, which closed in June, to finance new mortgage loans. The society collected around $4 billion from 6 deferred share issues. Deferred shares, which rank below common and preferred shares, are a form of capital used by building societies. Unlike commercial banks, building societies cannot raise capital by issuing ordinary shares on the stock market. The share offered comprised of 4 Jamaican dollar issues, which raised $2.8 billion, and 2 US dollar issues, which raised $10.7 million US dollars. That's a combined $4.2 billion in local currency. VMBS says the aim is to see loan growth in the billions.
Let's now take a look at the numbers from the major stock markets around the world. After the break, more of the top business news stories BATV brought you this week. Stay with us. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. More news now. After several years of operating at a loss, the government is planning to renovate the Montego Bay Convention Center. The proposed renovation will cost some $200 million. BATV News spoke with Chairman of the Tourism Enhancement Fund, TEF, Godfrey Dyer, to get more details on the renovations. More in this report.
The Montego Bay Convention Center in Rose Hall, St. James, is known for hosting many meetings and conventions in the West, but the center has been losing millions of dollars over the past few years. According to a 2013 Gleaner report, the center was costing the government $1 million each day to maintain, but was earning significantly less. Now the government is saying it's time for an upgrade. Minister Bartlett says the renovations are expected to boost the center's profitability. TEF Chairman Godfrey Dyer says the facility had shortcomings from the outset.
With the renovation, as far as renovation is concerned, the roof has been leaking, so it's major repair to the roof. We have guttering. It's 132 square foot of building, and no guttering was there, so we are doing the guttering, and then where equipment that they either did not have or only have them in domestic type equipment, we're grading to commercial equipment, and things that they didn't have, we are bringing in those. So it's a mixture of refurbishment and equipment.
Meanwhile, Minister Bartlett says the government's interventions over the last 9 months have improved the center's revenue by 65%. He says a projected loss of more than 255 million Jamaican dollars has been reduced to around $38 million. Mr. Dyer noted that of the $200 million to be spent on renovations, over $100 million will be spent this year.
And this year, we're going to spend about $170 million. We have started already, We have been going on for the last 3 months.
In the meantime, the TEF chairman says the renovations which have been made so far have already started to pay off.
A fair amount of it is finished already. We, for instance, over the weekend gone here, we had a large group of, I think, in excess of 1,500 from overseas. And some of these equipment, if we did not get them, we wouldn't have this group, because they came in on many inspections before the decision, and they were told what and what would be in place. So those are things that we had to have in place. So we would not have a group of 1,500 to accommodate if we did not put in some of these facilities.
Jamaica is losing 3 cruise ships this year, but it's also gaining some additional ones. Tourism Minister Ed Bartlett says the country is still projecting high cruise visitor arrivals as the government works on attracting more vessels.
Minister Bartlett says the news of cruise ships pulling out of Falmouth this year is a setback to the tourism industry. However, he notes that there's a contingency plan in place.
The 3 vessels that are going to be repositioned, in fact it's 2 that will be repositioned in 18-19, will pull just a little under 100,000 packs. The third,
what's packs?
That is people.
Okay.
Right? The third one, which is celebrity, which people talk about, we didn't position because we couldn't find a berth for them. We gave it to Princess. So in the sense of it, they were not really pulling out. It's just that we could not accommodate them. Okay? Now, we are bringing other vessels that will be coming in between. We are also creating an improvement in the port next door to allow for 2 Oasis-class ships to be in Falmouth at once.
He says the expansion plans in other areas will make the fallout seamless.
All of that is going to enable us over the time to still have, this year, 669,000 passengers coming into Falmouth, and next year, just a little under 600,000. So the impact of the fallout is not going to be as significant as it might have been. But that's Falmouth alone. While all of that is happening, Montego Bay is going to be increasing by pretty close to 50%. Same thing with Ocho-Rios. In addition to that, a new port expansion in Ocho-Rios is going to allow for additional crews from Carnival.
Meanwhile, as the dialogue surrounding cruise ship stopovers continue, Minister Bartlett says Kingston could be on the Northern Caribbean itinerary soon.
President of the Jamaica Agricultural Society, Senator Norman Grant, says he's against the government selling the Coconut Industry Board's ordinary shares in Seprod. Anthony Morgan tells us more.
In March last year, Cabinet approved the disposal of 75% of Seprod's ordinary shares held by the Coconut Industry Board, CIB. The government had said it owned 163 million shares through the CIB, but said it had plans to dispose of 122 million of those shares, worth over $2 billion. According to the government, the proceeds of the sale were to be transferred into the consolidated fund. But the CIB vowed to fight for the shares, which it says would affect its operations. That position is still being supported today by President of the Jamaica Agricultural Society, JAS, Senator Norman Grant, who says the shares should remain with the farmers.
It's a controversial issue, and we understand that when you are strapped for cash, you want to put your hands on anything you can get. But you know, the history dictates, the history indicates that the seed was sowed by the coconut farmers, and therefore, to that extent, I think good sense should prevail.
Senator Grant says the government wants to sell the separate shares because it's strapped for cash.
I am in support of the shares remaining with the coconut farmers, because you also have JACRA, which is what the government is doing, and it's a move that I supported. I worked on the legislative work even from when I was in the Senate, the merging of coconut, coffee, cocoa, and the commodity. So that is going to be a regulatory arm that will regulate the commodities.
But the JAS president says the government should instead work with the coconut farmers to ensure that the fund is retained for the expansion of the coconut industry.
When we come back, women in South Sudan are being used as payment for crimes other family members commit. More on that after the break. Welcome back to Weekend Business Report. A strike by judges in South Sudan means more people are turning to customary courts to settle legal issues. Such courts focus more on settling disputes without disrupting peace and coexistence in communities. But because the verdicts are based on traditional laws and norms, justice, especially for women, is not always achieved. More from Al Jazeera.
Evelyn knows she's the only girl in her family. What she doesn't know is that means she will be given to another family as a payoff, compensation for a killing committed by her father Ohide years ago.
Our pride is a lady. You have to pay them a pride of a human being like you. I've given them a pride, and my baby, either my baby girl
Ohide is following a customary law based on traditional beliefs in South Sudan. And he's not the only one to rely on such a system. 27-year-old Rebecca lost her husband a year ago. She was given to his brother as inheritance. She says she had no option but to accept.
What could I do? No one was going to help me take care of my kids, and I can't do that alone. So now my brother-in-law is my husband.
Africa's youngest nation gained independence in 2011, but has been in conflict for the past 4 years. The fighting has resulted in poor development, even in the capital Juba. Official judicial systems exist only in state capitals, and more than half the population live in rural areas. Customary courts are often the nearest and fastest option. Verdicts are usually issued immediately after cases are heard. Marino Petia is a customary chief, and he says he and his fellow chiefs know what they're doing.
Customary courts deal with community issues based on traditions. If you're the chief, you should know the traditions of the tribes. There are no written laws. We follow the rules of our ancestors. They tell us about it, and we enforce it.
But not all those who go to court are happy when they leave.
Customary courts focus more on settling disputes without disrupting peace and coexistence in communities. Because verdicts are based on traditional laws and norms, justice, especially for women, is not usually achieved.
Analysts say that lack of justice for women in customary courts is rooted in the system the court is based on.
The whole thing is anchored on traditions. And that's why you find most of the customary courts in South Sudan do not guarantee basic rights for women, and that is because the customary law, customary practices do not pay a lot of attention to women's rights.
Including the rights of girls like Evelyn, who committed no offense, but because she was born a woman, she's being given to a family she doesn't know to pay for a crime carried out by her own father. Hiba Morgan, Al Jazeera, Juba.
And that's all the time we have for this week's show. Thanks so much for watching. On behalf of the entire Weekend Business Report team, I'm Kenny. See you next time.